It was a day just like any other. But for Mark, a struggling single dad, life never felt easy. Juggling 2 jobs, bills piling up, and the constant worry of how to provide for his young daughter. He was tired, both mentally and physically. Yet, despite the overwhelming weight on his shoulders, Mark never stopped helping others. It was just who he was. He believed that no matter how hard life got, there was always room for kindness. One afternoon, as Mark drove home from his shift at the local mechanic shop, something caught his eye on the side of the road. A car had pulled over, its hazard lights flashing, and next to it stood a woman, clearly frustrated and trying to figure out how to change a flat tire. Mark, without hesitation, pulled over. It didn't matter that he was exhausted from a long day, or that he still had to pick up his daughter from school. He saw someone in need and knew he could help. The woman was grateful as Mark approached, her relief evident as she explained she had no idea how to change a tire. She had been on her way to an important meeting, running late, and now she was stuck. Mark smiled kindly, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. What seemed like a routine act of generosity for him, changing a tire, was turning into something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. As Mark worked, the woman, Sarah, struck up a conversation. She was warm and friendly, not at all like the high-powered business types he had sometimes encountered. They laughed, shared small talk, and for a moment, Mark almost forgot the constant stress that lingered in the back of his mind. Little did he know, Sarah was no ordinary woman. She was a millionaire, but that part of her life wasn't obvious. She wasn't flashy, and a down-to-earth attitude made it easy to overlook her wealth. But beneath her calm exterior, Sarah was used to making big decisions and solving problems. And soon, she was about to make a decision that would change Mark's life forever. As Mark finished tightening the last bolt on the tire, Sarah thanked him sincerely, offering to pay him for his time. But Mark, being the man he was, shook his head. "No need," he said with a humble smile. "Just glad I could help." He waved it off as if it were nothing, but to Sarah, it meant everything. As Sarah drove away, something about the encounter stuck with her. She couldn't stop thinking about the kindness of the man who had helped her without expecting anything. In return, she had met all kinds of people in her line of work, many driven by self-interest, others by ambition. But this man was different. There was something special about him, something genuine and selfless. Sarah knew she couldn't just leave things as they were. Later that evening, Mark returned home, his mind already focused on what needed to be done next: cooking dinner, helping his daughter with homework, and preparing for another long day ahead. Little did he know, his simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that would soon turn his world upside down. As Mark settled into his usual routine, Sarah was already making plans, determined to repay the favor in a way that would change his life forever. But what exactly was Sarah planning? How would a millionaire like her show her gratitude to a man like Mark? And how would this unexpected connection transform not just his life, but the future of his daughter? As the days passed, Mark carried on with his usual routine, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing around him. His life, while difficult, was predictable, filled with early mornings, long workdays, and nights spent caring for his daughter. Emma was his world, the one bright spot in his life that kept him going. At just 8 years old, she had already developed a keen sense of the struggles her dad faced. She rarely asked for anything because she knew they couldn't afford much. But Mark tried his best to give her a happy childhood, even if it meant sacrificing his own needs. Meanwhile, Sarah hadn't forgotten about the man who had helped her on that roadside. In fact, She had been thinking about him constantly. As a self-made millionaire, Sarah had worked her way up from nothing, so she understood what it was like to struggle. But what struck her about Mark was his humility and genuine kindness, something she rarely saw in her world of high-stakes business. She couldn't stop replaying the moment when he refused any payment, simply happy to help. That kind of selflessness had a profound impact on her. Sarah started doing some research. She learned more about Mark's situation, discovering the financial hardship he was going through. Mark had no idea that the woman he had helped was a powerful businesswoman with the resources to make a real difference in his life. For her, it wasn't just about repaying a favor. It was about recognizing someone who deserved a break, someone who had been dealt a tough hand in life, but still chose to be kind. Sarah knew she had to step in, but she needed to be careful. She didn't want to insult Mark or make him feel like a charity case. She wanted to offer him an opportunity, one that would allow him to take control of his own future. At the same time, Mark was facing a new challenge. His hours at the mechanic shop were being cut back, leaving him with even less income to support his family. He tried not to show his worry around Emma, but the strain was becoming harder to hide. The bills kept coming, and the idea of losing his job entirely terrified him. The weight of it all was starting to crush him, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the facade that everything was fine. One evening, after another exhausting day, Mark received an unexpected call. It was from Sarah. She explained that she had been thinking about him and wanted to meet up again to discuss something important. Mark was surprised. Why would she want to talk to him again? Still, he agreed, curious about what she had to say. When they met, Sarah wasted no time getting to the point. She admired his work ethic and how he had handled himself the day they met. She could tell that he was a good father, doing everything he could to provide for his daughter, and she wanted to help in a way that would empower him, not just give him a handout. Mark listened, confused and a little suspicious. He had been let down before, and people who offered help often had strings attached, but Sarah seemed sincere. Then she made him an offer that left him speechless. She had a small business she had recently acquired, but didn't have the time to manage personally. It was a struggling auto repair shop, not too different from where Mark worked, and she needed someone with experience and a strong work ethic to take over its operations. The offer came with a decent salary, enough to lift Mark out of his current financial problems and give him the stability he desperately needed. In exchange, she wanted Mark to run the shop, bring in new business, and help turn it around. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Mark was stunned. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like him. It felt too good to be true. His mind raced. Could he really do this? Could he take on the responsibility of running a whole business? He had always been a hard-working mechanic, but managing an entire shop was a whole new level. Doubt started creeping in, and the weight of the decision pressed down on him. What if he failed? What if he let Sarah down? Worse, what if he couldn't provide for Emma the way she needed him to? Sarah could see the hesitation in his eyes and assured him that she believed in him. She wasn't just giving him a job, she was giving him a chance to build something for himself and his daughter. But even with her confidence in him, Mark was torn. He had spent so long just surviving that the idea of actually thriving seemed almost impossible. As Mark considered the offer, his life back home was growing more complicated. Emma's school was sending notices about unpaid fees, and he had to make the difficult decision to delay payments on other bills just to keep the lights on. Every day felt like a fight to keep his head above water. And this opportunity with Sarah felt like both a lifeline and a huge risk. Could he afford to take the chance Or was it too much of a gamble with so much on the line? The conflict inside him grew stronger. Mark's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest as Sarah waited for his answer. This was it, the moment that could change everything. But the fear was still there, gnawing at him. What if he failed? What if he couldn't handle the pressure? He glanced down, thinking about Emma. He wanted to give her the life she deserved, something better than constant struggle. Maybe this was his one shot to do that. He took a deep breath and looked back at Sarah. "I'll do it," Mark finally said, his voice steady but filled with nerves. Sarah smiled warmly, as if she knew he was making the right choice. "I won't let you down." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Mark was suddenly thrust into a world of responsibilities he had never imagined. Running the auto repair shop was tough. There were business decisions to make, employees to manage, and customers to please. The first few days were overwhelming, and more than once, Mark questioned if he had made the right decision. But every time doubt crept in, he thought about Emma and the future he was building for her. That thought kept him going. Sarah checked in regularly, offering advice and support, but she never hovered. She trusted Mark to find his own way, and slowly but surely, he began to find his footing. The shop, which had been struggling for months, started to see a turnaround. Customers were coming back, impressed by Mark's knowledge and dedication. Word of mouth spread, and soon, business was picking up. But just as things seemed to be improving, disaster struck. A major piece of equipment broke down, and the cost of repairing it was astronomical, far more than the shop could afford. Mark felt the familiar panic rising. This was exactly what he had feared, a setback that could ruin everything. He stayed, late into the night, running the numbers over and over, trying to figure out a way to fix the problem without going under. The pressure was suffocating. And for the first time since he took the job, Mark wasn't sure if he could pull through. Next morning, as he stood in the shop, staring at the broken equipment, Sarah showed up. She saw the worry on his face and didn't need to ask what was wrong. Instead of offering a solution, she simply asked, "What do you think we should do?" Mark was surprised. He expected her to take over or offer financial help, but she was leaving. The decision up to him. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about just fixing the immediate problem. It was about stepping up, owning his role, and finding a way forward. Mark took a deep breath and laid out his plan. It would mean cutting back in other areas for a while, but he was confident the shop could recover if they made some smart moves. Sarah listened, nodded, and gave him the go-ahead. It was a risky decision, but Mark knew he had to trust himself. Over the next few weeks, he worked harder than ever, finding creative solutions to keep the shop running without the equipment. The employees rallied behind him, and slowly, the shop began to bounce back once more. Mark's plan was working, and the business was on solid ground again. The turning point came when a large contract came through from a local trucking company. They needed regular maintenance on their fleet, and they had heard about the quality of work Mark and his team were doing. This deal would bring in more revenue than the shop had seen in years. It was the break Mark had been waiting for, the moment when everything fell into place. With the shop now thriving, Mark found himself in a place he never thought possible. Financially stable, confident in his work, and able to provide a better life for Emma. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what it represented. For the first time in a long time, Mark wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. As he stood outside the shop one evening, watching the sunset, Sarah pulled up in her car. She stepped out and smiled at him, clearly, proud of everything he had accomplished. "I knew you had it in you," she said. Mark smiled back, feeling a sense of gratitude that was hard to put into words. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. "I don't know where I'd be without your help." But Sarah shook her head. "You did this, Mark. I just gave you an opportunity. The rest was all you." Mark thought about that for a moment and realized she was right. He had doubted himself for so long, but now he saw the strength he had always had. And as he looked ahead, he knew that no matter what challenges came next, he was ready. As Mark headed home that night, Emma was waiting for him, excited to hear about his day. He hugged her tightly, knowing that their lives had changed for the better. It wasn't just luck. It was hard work, kindness, and the willingness to take a chance that had gotten them here. In the end, Mark's story wasn't just about a struggling, single dad who helped a woman change her tire. It was about how a simple act of kindness set off a chain of events that transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined.